Hi, everyone. Welcome to the October meeting of the Portsmouth Conservation Commission. The first item on the agenda is the approval of last month's minutes. Does anyone have any changes they need to make? I have a couple. This is on, there's no page numbers. Oh, I guess 15:16. Next one down, I can just show these to you, but there's just there should be a word added into towards restoration. We'll have to include getting a delineation. And then this is on 90 FW Hartford Drive. I thought the motion was to postpone this application until either a new wetland delineation and restoration plan had been completed or a restoration plan using the current delineation. Is that?
I think we had to officially say that we postponed to the next meeting, but in the minutes,
I just think there was he was kind of given two options.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this really reflects that.
Yeah, it can be.
And then kind of the same thing for 80 FW Hartford Drive, because we had the same motion made. And that's all I had. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes for the September 13th meeting.
Seconded?
Second.
All right, no discussion since we already made the edits. All in favor? Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the State Wetland Bureau application for Maplewood Avenue Bridge. Is there someone here to speak to that?
Hi, Dave DeFosis, Public Works, here with my two experts, Kimberly Peace, who's our wetland certification person that's doing the permitting, and Aaron LaChance is our professional engineer. The city is seeking to rehabilitate the Maplewood Avenue Bridge. I know most of you went to the site walk that we had last week, and I think we answered most of the on-site questions, but we'll be available to answer your questions after their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Kimberly Peace, and I'm with Hoyle Tanner and Associates, and we are the design and permitting consultants for this project. If you'll go to the next slide. This is just a location map to orient everyone where the Maplewood Avenue Bridge is. This is oriented north and south, and it crosses the North Mill Pond. If you go to the next slide. This is a bridge that's been here for a very long time, single span stone arch bridge. Initially constructed 1896, had 2 additional spans, as we talked about when we were out in the field. Previous repair work has occurred. It is currently on the state's red list due to its serious condition. We are working on improving this situation so that the bridge does not become a closed bridge because it's such an important piece of infrastructure for the city. There are 2 lanes of traffic, and this is a Tier 4 stream crossing, which is a tidal crossing according to the DES wetland rules. Next slide. So a lot of words on here. Basically what we're looking at is we are installing a geopolymer liner. I had to get that word right, geopolymer liner. And it is something that is spray applied on the inside of that metal arch. And that is going to give some structural stability to the arch. And this is going to help that wall become more stabilized so that we don't have, we'll get some design life out of it. I believe somewhere in here we're talking about a 10 to 15 year design life, at which time we're looking at a complete replacement. And so that gives the city some time to find the funding for that. There are also some sections of the retaining wall and then supplemental riprap that are going to be repaired in order to, again, add to the stability of the structure. So drainage system improvements, guardrail support slab replacement. If you've been out there, you saw the guardrails are kind of a little tipped, and so all of this is in general just a rehabilitation of the structure so that we can improve it for the next 10 to 15 years. This is going to be a complete shutdown with a detour, alternating traffic at the beginning and end of the construction periods. So next slide. For some of you that were out there, then we were looking at, this is the situation that we're looking at in terms of replacement of stone along those areas where the stone is just shifted over time. And then if we look at the next slide, the pictures from within the arch, I think tells the story. This is really that repair that we are looking at, that the geopolymer liner is going to, go over and support so that this arch, this concrete, or this metal plate arch is supported and stabilized. So then in terms of environmental resource review, we did not have state listed species from NHB or Fish and Game, federally listed northern long-eared bat. We don't have tree removals for this project. There were some invasive species. They will have to do a control plan for the contractor. Cultural Resources took a look at the bridge, even though it's a structurally old bridge. Because of this work, it's not going to have an adverse effect to the structure. Water quality, ESC, erosion sediment controls will be handled with the contractor. We have applied for a wetland permit from the Army Corps and from the state. And then we do not need a shoreline permit because the 100-foot tidal buffer zone, all work is going to be in that zone. So we won't need a shoreline permit for that. So. And then when we look at the impacts that are a result of this, there is no impact to the floodplain wetlands that will impact flood storage. The liner is going to be sprayed on. It's going to be 4.5 inches thick within the opening. We discussed this with DES quite a different number of ways in terms of how we calculate that in terms of hydraulic analysis. We have run the hydraulic analysis several different ways according to our connections with DES. And eventually we came to the conclusion, so the fill from the liner below highest observable tide line, HOTL, is approximately 38 square feet. Again, that's looking at the liner, the length, and then the overall, the arch. And then to offset that, we had talked in the field about there are footings that the arch currently sits on. Because we're using a different form to strengthen that, we're able to reduce those footings, and so that's going to reduce fill below the water, and so that's going to offset that fill below the high tide line. So after the repairs are done with that offsetting balance, the hydraulic performance or the hydraulic opening, if you talk about stream crossings, this is going to match or be an improvement to that situation. And then the proposed riprap is replacement of riprap that was either currently or had been historically placed. And so those riprap impacts are considered temporary. And that was a discussion that we had with DES as well. So if we look at the impact, this is our table, and it shows the impacts. So again, the permanent impacts below high tide line are 38 square feet. We do have some temporary impacts, some impacts to the tidal buffer zone, and then impacts, we calculated them for New Hampshire DES versus Army Corps, given the Army Corps doesn't identify the bank areas as an impact. And then if we look at the plan, I think you all have a copy of the plan. I know there's a lot on here, so I anticipate, can I walk over there? Am I still mic'd if I walk over there?
I think there's a
Take this?
laser pointer.
No, there's a laser pointer there.
Oh, okay. Laser pointer. Hold stop button for the pointer. No, did I just mess something up?
There you go.
Oh, okay. There we go. So as you can see, there's a lot going on in this, but these pipes that run through here, this is also included as part of our water diversion. So what we have here is what's called a temporary, it's going to be a temporary dewatering situation. Aaron, tell me the name of this again. Porta-dam, thank you. So it's basically going to dam off the structure except for these two pipes, which will flow through the middle of the bridge and through the crossing. So we will continue to have flow, that is a requirement. And then there'll be room on each side of the pipe for the contractors to work in the dry, which is what is needed to do in order to do to spray on the liner. And I know that there was discussion about this in the field. We certainly recognize that this is not going to be a perfect scenario. These are the biggest pipes that we can fit through the crossing and still have work on each side for the contractor to work. So we looked at this several different ways, and this is the best possible scenario to keep aquatic flow, aquatic passage through the pipes and still get the work done in the shortest amount of time. So again, we were balancing those impacts of restricting the tidal flow versus getting the work done. And so this is our proposition. Again, we talked to DES about this dewatering plan, and this is the plan that we have come up with to date. And I think if you see on the next slide, it's more of a detail. Again, so these are the cross sections showing what that sort of sprayed on liner is going to look like versus the area of the concrete footing that's going to be removed. And then if you look at the next slide, we were showing the kind of more details of the water diversion plan sort of highlighted. And you can see the cross section there. Again, so those will be the water bypass pipes that will go through and allow tidal flow to be unrestricted. So I think that's the last slide. If we look at the next one, project schedule. So we did submit the wetland permit application. We hope to start bidding the fall, winter of 2023 with starting construction in late summer, early fall. We don't have time of year construction restrictions at this point. We are continuing coordination with U.S. Army Corps in terms of essential fish habitat. There are a few species that we have to continue coordination with, but otherwise we don't have a time of year restriction at this point. Because it's tidal, there is not really a low flow situation. So, but typically late summer, early fall. So.
Questions? Allison?
So, just to get the picture correct in my head, so here's the bridge. You've got dams on either side to keep this dry in here, and the two linear pipes are going to be on the through the dam on the other side of the dam.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just concerned that, you know, we've had 100-year storms recently, and I'm just wondering if there would be any possibility of breaching the dams when we have another storm.
I mean, the fact that that this goes into North Mill Pond and then outlets again into so close to the Piscataquag River, that really the tidal influence has much more water level change than the 100-year storm. Although that was analyzed when we did the hydraulic analysis, and the pipes that we have proposed aren't anticipated to exceed their carrying capacity because the North Mill Pond has such a capacity to hold more stormwater. So.
And so, how long are they actually going to be in place? I mean, like, how long do you think the entire project is going to take, the dams and?
Aaron, how long?
We're trying to be as flexible as possible with the contract durations to give the flexibility and best price for the project. But if I had to guess, the lining work with the diversion, 2 months.
Thank you.
Other questions? I had one regarding when you're actually spraying on this, what is it, geopolymer concrete stuff? How do you protect so that, you know, from like, I don't know, overspray? I'm not sure kind of the logistics of how that actually goes on, and how do you protect surrounding areas and the bed?
I'm not sure how they protect the bed. That is a good question. I do know that this is a solution that's been approved for aquatic use. So even in its liquid form, you know, the exposure to the water isn't something that it's going to, you know, carry away. We have to worry about that being dry. I mean, I'm sure. Sort of, I envision it sort of like you spray painting a wall. Like they'll have to sort of block off the areas they don't want to receive the polymer, and then it is a spray-on material, and it tends to like, it's very sticky and it tends to stay where it's put. So I think they're very, very careful about where it goes.
Yeah. Does it require a particular temperature? Like, I would love to see this work, obviously not done in the summer, just for the habitat, but also like traffic. But I'm assuming that concrete probably has a temperature that it requires it to be at for it to work.
I imagine so. I don't know the actual product spec.
Do you mind stepping up to the microphone
Sorry.
when you speak
Yeah,
so it's
that's
under the
true.
recording? Thank you. And
Aaron
just saying your
LaChance,
name.
Oil Tanner. So this is a cementitious product, and therefore temperature restrictions, typically 40 degrees and rising, maybe 50 degrees depending on the manufacturer. There's a couple different brands out there, but it's the worst for traffic, but best for construction. So
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Lynn.
Curious about all the riprap that's adjacent to the, you know, the opening of the bridge. How much of that has to get moved, and is there any effort to kind of protect the seaweed and all the little interstitial critters that are living in the rocks?
I'm not sure that any of it's getting excavated,
Okay.
is it? No, it's not getting excavated. It's just replacing and putting on top of And again, those habitats will reform over time, and then the seed beds will be there. It just, again, putting another layer of stability.
Got it.
I'm assuming a lot of that will dry out, though, if it's in between the two dams, right?
It will temporarily, yes.
The rockweed and everything, okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Someone want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve as is.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second, discussion? I mean, I don't feel like we have a lot of options here. Bridge, so with the way it's going, and yeah, I mean, that's a major thoroughfare to get into the city, so, in the 10 to 15 years, I guess, that the repairs will last, I'm hoping, we'll have lots of opportunities to come up with a really good solution for construction of a new bridge and what that new bridge will look like, et cetera.
Right.
And maybe not wait until the last minute for the replacement. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the wetland conditional use permit application for 0 Springbrook Circle. Is there someone to speak to that? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Hi, good afternoon. Dean Savramis, Vice President of the Springbrook Condominium Association. And do you have the other drawing, the aerial photo?
I do, yep. This one?
Yeah, that's it. So I know we met last week and talked about the proposed project, but what we're proposing is, I don't know, will a regular laser pointer work?
I don't know.
Let's try it.
I don't think so. It's not visible to people online anyway.
Oh, okay, all right, then we'll do this. So this particular parking lot here, which lies between buildings 6 here and building 5 there, has walkways that connect 20 condo units to it. And our condominium docks allow up to 2 vehicles per unit. So that would be 40 cars. This particular parking lot, as constructed, it can accommodate somewhere between 26 and 28 spaces. So we don't have sufficient parking to accommodate the units that are connected to it. And this is the what I would consider to be the worst location on the property in terms of not having sufficient parking capacity. And we frequently get comments from unit owners regarding that. So what we were planning to do is this parking lot over here, which is also what we consider to be an overflow lot, it really only is accessed by 8 condos, and there's always plenty of parking available in this lot. So the thought was, if we were to extend this walkway here along the side of the building and connect it to this parking lot, as a minimum, there's 4 condos here that could avail themselves of it, and then there's another 4 condominiums here that could avail themselves. Now, there's no assigned parking, and anyone can park, wherever they want. But from a logistical perspective, it seemed like that would be a very, very viable option for these units, and it was the minimum distance of other options that were available in terms of installing a sidewalk. The other thing that we looked at was installing additional parking. The existing lots are very difficult. They're either right up against the setback of the property line, or as this one you can see right here, it's right up against the wetlands, the pond on the property. We did look at, in here, basically there's a traffic circle right there, and we did consider installing a parking lot in this particular area. It'd be more costly. It probably roughly would be about 8,500 square feet of impervious surface, which, you know, all the stormwater on the property is discharged into the pond, so there would be some impact there, versus the walkway, which is a little over 800 square feet of impervious surface. So that's really what we're looking to do, is to get approvals for the installation of that walkway for the reasons described.
Questions? Yeah, Allison.
I know when we were out on the site walk that I had mentioned this, and I still think that it's a better alternative rather than having the new sidewalk join right at the conjunction of the walk that comes from those first 4 units and connects out to where the walkway goes to the parking lot that you're referring to. Have it go sort of 8 feet from where that corner is, and the reason for that is that if you expect those people from the units that are in the lower right-hand corner to use the parking lot behind them, those, I think that you should move the walkway closer to them. Otherwise, you're just going to get people walking across the lawn to get to where and I think it would just be more convenient for them and allow them to use it more freely.
Sure, there's a lot of flexibility there, and I think I can speak for the board that we're very flexible in terms of, you know, where that walkway attaches to the existing walkway, and that sounds like a good suggestion.
I think it would just be better utilized.
Yep.
If we could go back to the other slide, I think it would make your point better. I'm David Wade, I'm sorry. We would cut the,
Yeah, this one. No, the other one. No, down.
So that's the same drawing with less detail, but,
right.
Yeah, there you go. So,
Right, it's basically, that's,
so instead of connecting it here,
Yes,
you're
connect it
suggesting like
about 8 feet from that corner toward the...
8 feet from this corner towards the building.
Yes, correct.
So more-
you're
more in
more,
this
more in the
neighborhood.
middle. Yeah.
So if that, yeah.
I think that would work out better for the people that are in those, to get them to use it more
That's a good-
readily.
That's a good suggestion.
Have you give, sorry, go ahead.
We do
Allison.
appreciate your thinking about the amount of impervious surface that you're adding and the fact that, you know, we really don't like trees being cut down, especially in the buffer, but so leaving that circle intact with the trees there is perfect.
Have you given any more thought to the lighting on the pathway?
Yeah, so I know we talked about that, and there's been no determinations on that, but again, there's tremendous, you know, flexibility. Our initial thoughts were, and we talked about this, but again, so there are 3 storage sheds right here, and there are 3 storage sheds there, and there's typically a power supply that we can tap into. You know, originally what we were thinking was we would just come off the power supply and probably mount something towards the top of the shed, shining downward onto the walkway surface. Kind of simple, easy to access, easy to maintain, but you know we're not really set or fixed on that. It could be something other, but it would just, you know, and the thought was it would be shining downward but away from the building in that location, so we weren't adding any additional light shining, you know, into someone's unit or windows, but at the same time downward, not casting you know, a lot of light towards the woods or whatnot. But again, a lot of options there for lighting, and we're certainly open-minded if somebody thought that there was a more appropriate option.
Yeah, I think if you're attaching it to the building, but your pathway is, you know, set off the building, you're going to be casting kind of farther out than and less downward because the pathway's not right, you know, up against the building. So I'm not sure that's the best option for lighting if we're trying to limit the light that's, you know, going to the buffer and the wetland. we had talked about kind of the low bollard lighting, which I personally think would still be a better lighting design.
So you're talking about like a pipe baller that might be maybe
Yeah, I
30
think-
inches off the ground, and then it shines directly downward, and they could run along the edge of the sidewalk, probably between
Yeah,
the walkway and the
that's more
building
the
on that edge.
direction, yeah. And I don't know all the different styles necessarily, but something more along the lines of that.
Yeah.
I think that's very doable.
Okay.
Are those lights typically, sorry, over here, are those lights typically motion activated, or are they on?
So they,
Throughout all the dark periods.
the lights on the property are on a photocell, so they come on at dusk. And they're currently, for the most part, there's some variation, but the lights that are there are high-pressure sodium, and that's what was placed on the property when the development was constructed. There's been some talk about converting over to LED, and I know 5, 6, maybe even more than that, they didn't have the LEDs were up around the 5,000 range. It was really, really white light and not necessarily ideal for residential application, but I know that they've gotten the light down around the 2,700 range now for LEDs. So it's something we're considering more seriously now that the tone of the light, I think, is better for a residential application. But yeah, to answer your initial question, they're on a photocell.
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
So when we were at the site, we talked about a planting plan. You talked about doing some plantings around the building. So from our point of view, doing plantings around the buffer is what we're looking for. It's not going to help that much around the building. I think it's great. So you have a planting plan? Is that what?
Well, no, what,
Well, sort of.
Okay.
So, two things. It's what you talked about. So we recently met with a landscaper, and we've identified, was it 76 plants or something around the property that were going to be, well, they've either died or they're dying, or, so there's 76 plants we're going to be installing around the property. For this particular property, we haven't addressed it yet, but there's two issues here. So in the pond we have beaver, and they were over here. There's a big crop of trees, and they were doing a number on that a few years ago. So we installed some hardware cloth around them to deter them. So then they started eating the plants around the building. So we're in the process of identifying someone we can consult with in terms of what type of plants would thrive in that environment and that are not appealing to beaver. So we're trying to put something there. But I think what you're talking about is plantings between the walkway and the buffer zone. So just yesterday, separate really from this issue, but obviously related to, because it's adjacent to this, we did meet with Kate and Peter, and we want to develop and identify a proper wetland buffer management plan for here. I think we talked about we've got about 10% of that pond bank historically has been maintained to preserve the visual access to the pond. We don't allow any recreation activities or anything on there, but visually. And that was feedback we got many years ago from some folks who live there and look out towards the pond. So we are going to be developing some type of a plan, which I would imagine is going to involve removal of invasive species and then installation of native plants, and it'll be subsequently part of our landscape contract. But that's down the road. I mean, that's not anything I can promise. We have a board, we have to present it, it has to be approved. But with respect to this project, beyond what we just talked about, I mean, if there are particular plants or whatnot at a particular location that the commission would be interested in seeing, I think we're certainly open, to that. I don't really have a concept in terms of, what the ask is or what the desire, would be in that location. But again, I think that we're certainly open. I know that, right, we got, I think we talked about this, recently, that, the maintenance along here kind of got slack, and there's a big, thick cluster, of what I would consider a thick cluster of Phragmites in this area. Looks really, really dense and concentrated, and it looks like over the years it's encroached onto the grassy mowed area. And I think the distance between the shoreline here and to the edge of where these Phragmites is, I think that distance is in excess of the 25-foot buffer. I did a quick check using an online mapping service, and I think it's into the 30-something foot range. So, I don't know, were you talking about plants immediately adjacent to the walkway or something as part of the buffer?
Well, ideally, it was something that was part of the buffer. I mean, there were certain areas, like you had the clump of trees over here, and you had the Phragmites, and that area in between didn't have a lot of plantings, as far as I remember, especially closer to the trees. So something in the 25, 50 feet.
In that, yeah. So,
Yeah, and closer, not
Right.
at the end of the grass kind of area.
So, I can tell you is, me and Dave, we met yesterday, and we're motivated. Again, it's a process. We have a board of directors, has to present it, has to be approved. But we are motivated because I think having an established wetland buffer plan is going to eliminate, and have it as part of the landscape contract, it's going to eliminate any ambiguity in the future in terms of, how that area should be cared for, what the do's and don'ts are. But, that's not something that, we're going to be back here presenting next month. I don't think it's going to happen that quickly. But I certainly can tell you that we certainly are motivated to work with you folks and come up with some type of a plan that's approvable, that we can capture in writing, and not just the establishment of it, but then the maintenance of it annually in terms of what that's going to entail.
So
We're hoping to meet before summer so that we can have that plan approved and go ahead and start, so.
When you're speaking, sir, would you mind being in front of the
Oh, I'm
microphone so
sorry.
it's captured?
Our plan is to meet with the landscaper and perhaps the landscape designer to come up with a plan for that whole area that we're discussing now. But that's something that we hadn't planned on as far as putting the sidewalk in. This is something else that's going to run along with it. And Kate and Peter, we're going to be working with them trying to set that up, so.
Thank you. So I didn't know if Kate or Peter, because it would sort of be conditional, in my mind, on this permit would be conditional on them doing plantings on the buffer to offset.
I don't think that's a bad idea to offset the impacts of maybe the new impervious here. I think we are hoping to do a separate restoration plan with these guys, just because it will take a few months at least to get it together and make sure that we all approve of it when it is finalized. But I think for this, maybe just addressing the impacts of the sidewalk here, and then sort of addressing the Phragmites and the enforcement issues in the restoration plan separately might be the best way to go about this. I don't know what others think.
If we were to, I guess maybe more of a limited planting plan than what they're doing with the big restoration plan, what would you like to see, Barbara? Like, for me, I would like to see more plantings from the pathway closer to the wetland, like in between that area, before maybe it makes that hard left around the corner of the building. For me, that area in particular could really use some stabilization and some plants. But is that kind of what you're thinking?
That's what I was thinking, and we talked about blueberries.
Yeah, the only thing that I would be concerned about is that if they're actually going to do a restoration plan and they're going to remove any of that Phragmites, they're probably going to have to get a piece of equipment out there to dig deep enough to try to get rid of it. And if you've got other plants in that area,
Gotcha.
they'll probably be ruined. So it better, I think, to hold off for the restoration plan with the understanding that that's going to include buffer plantings. Personally, I mean,
No, I mean, that also makes sense. You don't want to undo what you did.
Yeah, as long as we have sort of jurisdiction on making sure that they do a planting, because right now, we're giving them a conditional use permit, so. Yeah, I totally think that makes sense, but do we have that clout, or whatever, later
well, we
on?
could stipulate that they follow through on the restoration plan within the year.
And that the restoration plan includes buffer
Yes.
plantings
Yeah.
on there. Sounds good. Does that sound good?
It sounded good, but I want to make sure I understood what I heard. So maybe someone could clarify.
Sure, so, you talked with Peter and Kate about potential restoration plan. And what we're suggesting is that you not put additional plants in the buffer until that plan is completed, but that there will be additional plants put in the buffer as part of that restoration plan. And so this conditional use permit will have that as a stipulation that within the year that the restoration plan should be completed.
Okay. So I don't have an issue with that, and neither does Dave.
That was our plan anyway.
So what we can do is if we get that approval, then we can go back to the board and the rest of the board members and make it clear to them that by going forward with the sidewalk, there's a commitment here that we will follow through with this restoration plan, which will include, plantings, the details of which obviously are yet to be determined. So I would want to at least get those board members on board so that they understand the ramifications of proceeding and what the commitment is.
I have a couple questions. The other sidewalks on the property, are they also 5 feet width?
They vary
Okay.
between 4 and 5 feet.
Is there any opportunity to not have it be 5 feet, have it be narrower? Obviously, less impact if it's a narrower sidewalk. 3,
So-
4, I mean, even a foot difference is
So
helpful.
the original plans here called for it to be 4 feet wide to match the existing. But as we were going through, we were advised at one point that the current code requirement for this application is 5 feet. So that's why we've been using 5 feet for calculation purposes and whatnot.
Okay.
So from the association's perspective, I don't think we have a strong feeling one way or the other, whether it's 4 or 5 feet, but we do want to make sure that, whatever we put in there is compliant
Yeah.
with current requirements. The last thing we want to do is obviously install something and have to getting involved with rework and disturbing that area a second time.
Yeah, understood.
So I don't know what the answer is. Like I said, I like your question, but I don't know if there is a requirement for it to be 5 feet.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either. I think that's something, yeah. Peter, do you know?
If that's something, if we can cut it down to 4 feet, we would gladly do that. That's, because I'm not sure if a 5 foot is a requirement for a walkway on a street versus this is a walkway on private property per se.
Yeah, yeah.
The ADA requires 5 feet. They have strengthened their rules on our city streets. They may still have flexibility on private, I'm not sure, but 5 feet is the minimum for ADA.
And who will, at the planning board?
Building inspector.
The building
I
inspector.
would say up to 5 feet would be a good way to go. Then,
Okay.
if they can reduce it, they'll reduce it.
Okay.
So
If that's, you could say,
So what I can tell you about that is we have done some other walkway replacement on the property, concrete that was spalling, deteriorated. There were even some sections that didn't meet current code, and there was at one point we did a replacement. It met the code requirements, but there was a complaint filed from at least one unit owner that it didn't meet ADA requirements. So subsequently, we did have to come back and we did have to grade and put in a transition ramp that met ADA requirements. So I would be extremely apprehensive
Yep.
about engaging in new construction that doesn't meet ADA requirements. It's likely that somebody, will report it, and then, we'll have to make it right. And my position would be, let's just do it right the first time and ensure that all overseeing authorities' requirements are met.
Yeah, Lynn.
Maybe this came up in the site walk, but was there any conversation around using something more permeable than just straight cement for the walkway material? Permeable cement or permeable asphalt or gravel even?
Well, so I guess when it's July or August and the ground's dry, gravel might be okay, but difficult to plow. The walkways are cleared with snow throwers. If this was down south, we'd have a lot of options, but the weathers in the Northeast, I think, oftentimes make it difficult. I personally don't have a lot of experience with permeable asphalt. I know that it's wet out there. It's pretty flat, and there have been some real drainage challenges, and I would be potentially worried about moisture coming up through any type of permeous material and then freezing. I think we talked about potentially putting up signs and making that a no salt area also last week when we were out there. So anything that could potentially increase the slip hazard, I think, would be something that we'd have to look at carefully. And I just to answer your question, we did not look at that, and I don't know if that would be a viable option. Maybe not. I just don't know.
Regarding the salt snow removal, considering how close it is to the water, ideally that would be a no salt use area, but how would it be enforced?
Well, it's like anything else. I mean, obviously we would post signs. It would be in the snow removal contract, flagging that area as a no salt. Now, what's to prevent a unit owner on their own from going out and purchasing salt and putting it down there? We can only address problems that we're aware of. So, I mean, obviously, if we saw that happening, the board could address it. But it's like any other enforcement. Really, you're asking people to do their best to comply, and you hope that they do. That particular location does get a lot of sun, in the wintertime. So I think that would certainly help. I think we talked last week too. There's some areas of the property, in the winter they never see sunlight, but this particular area does. So I would certainly hope that would help mitigate, the potential of any slip hazard. And there's other materials I'm assuming that could be put down there and made available that are acceptable in that location.
Would you be open to investigating a heated sidewalk to avoid that? It's low energy and it just takes away the whole snow removal thing.
I like the idea. I think it would be very difficult to sell that to the I don't know what the cost is for construction to install it, and finding a contractor who's experienced and familiar with it. But I think that would be a difficult sell to the property owners. That there's been some opposition, and we recently have incurred some expenses for some other issues we're addressing out there. On the surface, it sounds like a very luxurious item to have, and I can't imagine it would be met well. But I don't know, Dave. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I know it'll be costly because just to put them in your bathroom floors, to have heated floors, it's quite expensive. And you have to have tile people who know how to do that type of installation as well. I mean, it's a good size area, and I know there's a lot of other places that are just using sand only options as well, and We do have 144 units. We're talking about servicing perhaps 8 others. And I don't know if that cost factor, is, with the money that we budgeted now, no, we would not have that, the funds to do that. That's the easiest way to explain it, I guess. We never considered that fact.
Thank you.
When you guys are putting out your contract for your winter maintenance company, do you require that the company is Green Snow Pro certified? Which is Barbara can talk more about what that is, if you haven't heard of that. Do you want to just explain? Bart, you're better at that.
It's a New Hampshire state certification for anybody that does winter maintenance, and they take a course, and then they follow up with, I think it's yearly classes to maintain the certification, but then they're certified as a Green Snow Pro contractor. And they're taught how to reduce the amount of salt that they use without compromising safety at all. So that's basically what they do. And they do it and then market themselves as contractors. So it's usually, I don't know what the cost is now, but it's usually, a few $100s to maintain that, to get certified, and then like $50 to maintain it every year. So it's something you could ask for sure when you have them, to see if they are and recommend it, if possible. I mean, that would be a minimum, but.
Isn't it also pretty common amongst the bigger
it's
providers? It's good to know that it's not something that's real random.
So I hadn't heard that term before, and I don't know if the contractor who we've been using in more recent years has that certification or not. We haven't gone out to bid in the past specifically looking for or requiring it. I can tell you on a more general sense, it is extremely difficult to get quotes on any type of work, whether it's annual or recurring, or whether it's one-off projects, and we struggle to get stuff that is in the range of what we consider to be manageable or affordable. So now that we're aware of that, and if we get a competitive bid, from a contractor who has this certification, I mean, that's certainly, worthy of consideration. But from a practical or financial sense, to limit our search for a snow removal contract who has those qualifications, it's a tough position for the board to be in. If this was an apartment complex that I owned and I owned myself, that's what I wanted to do, that's what I could, but this isn't our money. This is the money of the association that belongs to the 144 units, so it's always a balancing act, in terms of what's cost effective, but, what's sound, clean construction services, and, we're always having to make those types of judgments, but things are very expensive right now. Insurance is extremely expensive. For those of you who maybe have a condo, it's the market's not what it was, 10, 15 years ago. It's far less competition. Our insurance has gone up considerably in the last 4 or 5 years by, I don't know, factor of 2.5. The snow removal contract's gone up. Our landscaping goes up. It's a good point. It's certainly worthy of consideration, but I would say I don't know that there would be support to limit our search solely to contractors that have those credentials.
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely worth trying to prioritize it.
Yeah.
I would do that. It does help with your liability, and it helps with their liability. There have been a couple of cases on that. So, to have them certified means that they're applying these practices that are aimed at being safer. But on our side, the salt's a huge issue in the fresh water. So, and little things like actually getting all the snow off the sidewalk beforehand and not relying on salt to, get rid of your snow and ice.
Yeah, it's now that you mentioned it, I'm sure I'm going to hear the term again. It's like the first time you're introduced to something you never heard before, and I'll probably hear the term, and I'll certainly share it with the board. And it's a fair point about the timing of when you remove the snow, but it's such a hard thing to control. One, the timing of the storm matters, and this isn't the only property they maintained. So they'll come in, they'll clear the roadway, they'll clear the center of the parking lot just to get the property accessible and people can get out and go to work. Then they're off clearing other properties, and then later in the day they come back and they do the walkway and the parking spaces. And when all that happens, depends on the timing of the storm and the other properties that they have to service, and which ones are commercial and which ones are residential, and whether it happens on a weekend or a weekday. And it's a hard thing for us to control, but it's a fair point. And obviously, when you clear your own yard, you think of stuff like that. Well, if I get it now, then I won't have to do this later. But it's always a challenge. It's a big piece of property. We have a lot of walkways out there too, and there's a lot of folks who don't want to do the snow removal on this project because of there's so many walkways. They like to stay in the truck. They like to plow the asphalt. But to get out, and I don't know how many thousands of linear feet of walkways we have out here on the property, but it's a lot. And that's what we've been told in the past, is that some contractors, they don't have the crew, to deal with the walkways. So that's a limiting factor for us as well.
One other question or suggestion I have is your silt fence, I think, should extend farther beyond where it ends there at that turn of the new sidewalk.
I think it ends right here.
Yeah, so
And
just,
you want to extend it to the tree line?
I don't know how far, if anyone has any suggestions on the commission, but I think it's ending a little short.
Prematurely.
Yeah,
I think extending it to the tree line. is
extending it to the
reasonable.
tree line, okay.
But
Yeah, I think the idea with the silt fence is to make sure that it covers all the construction before it enters, all the construction sediment before it starts going towards the pond. So extending it at least to where you're still putting in the new sidewalk where it's joining
Yep.
those two would be.
Yeah, so I think so somewhere around here, slightly beyond. Now, if this walkway gets moved back here, then we could probably just bring the silt fence to here, and that would probably maybe be a good termination point.
Yeah, I think so. I think at that point, you're far enough away from the wetland.
Yep. Yeah, I can't speak for the engineers. I'm not sure why they ended it there when they designed it. I know it's fairly flat here, where here it's sloped, but I don't see any harm in extending this further.
It just helps give a
Just to
boundary.
ensure everything's captured.
Yep. Any other questions? Someone want to make a motion?
I'll add one more question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So the area, when you were talking about doing a planting plan, and also that area is all grass and it's really green grass. I don't know if you're aware that you should have in your contract for your maintenance landscaper not to use fertilizer within the buffer. And then we're also asking applicants to agree to follow certain, what they call NOFA standards, which is organic farming.
Northeast Organic Farm.
Northeast Organic Farming, yeah, thank you. We have some write-ups on that we can send you to,
They're right on the website, too.
Yeah.
That's for the buffer zone you're talking about.
yeah, definitely for the buffer zone.
It's within 75 feet, no fertilizer. Is that right?
Gosh, now I can't remember.
I think it's.
I think it's actually less.
Yeah, it's low nitrogen, low phosphate fertilizer.
Within 75, or was it 50?
I
we
didn't
talked
think,
about.
I think I'm not sure that there was a limit. I'm not sure what the number was.
Okay, but that document's referenceable, and
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
that is. I mean,
No, make sure you have it.
that's an easy thing to comply with. I mean, we can easily specify that, in the landscape. So just to kind of recap. So I think that there's 4 suggestions. One is move the walkway back a little bit, maybe 8 feet. Pipe bollards, downward illuminating pipe bollards to illuminate the walkway. no fertilizer, within whatever is specified in the document the city has, and the development of a wetlands buffer restoration plan and maintenance plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have two more, but I think we're
I'll
going to
give it all to
stipulate.
you.
Okay, I'm just gonna get my pen out to start writing
Yeah,
this
so
stuff down. I'm running out of
It'll all be in
RAM
writing.
memory.
You'll have it all in writing too, once,
Oh.
once we
Okay.
make a motion and,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Are you going to go?
Yeah, I was going to make a motion, but if you don't want me to, it's
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if, because in the recommendations from the city, it was to do the placards or whatever, right?
I have that
Okay.
down here too.
We just
I have
mentioned it
two,
to him.
I have
so-
two more also, so,
Okay.
okay, who wants to try?
Okay, I'll make a motion to recommend approval to the planning board of this application with the following stipulations. That buffer markers are installed that can be purchased from the planning department. That no salt signs be installed. That the walkway is moved 8 feet from the current intersection toward the buildings. That you keep the walkway at a minimum width up to 5 feet. That you extend the silk fence to the tree line, or where appropriate, wherever the sidewalk is going in. If you move it in 8 feet, then it just goes to where that intersection would be. That you install downlighting along the path, and that you follow through on the restoration plan and increase plants in the buffer within a year. And then not a stipulation, but we would recommend that you use a Green Snow Pro certified vendor for winter maintenance.
Did you say no salting signs?
Yes.
No salt signs, yes.
Missed that.
I think that was the second.
Okay.
What was the very first thing you said?
The buffer markers.
I don't remember that. What are those?
Okay, so we have small, very attractive markers that you would put like along that strip that you have that's currently got plants in it for the pond, so that it just says that this is a sensitive area and you don't want to cut, and I can't remember what they actually say.
I can't either, but I think it just might say something along the lines of environmentally sensitive area, wetland boundary. It's sold by the city, so they're pretty standard with all these applications. We ask people to, it depends on the application, but either put them along the wetland buffer line or along the resource itself. In this case, I think what Allison mentioned with along where the vegetation is along the pond, that would be a really great spot. It's really just for education for residents to know that that's a sensitive area and that they should reconsider walking on it or cutting it or, you know, really impacting it in any way.
What's the spacing?
50 feet,
Every 50 feet?
just on a, a small wooden
Yeah.
or whatever.
It would also probably be helpful for your landscapers too, just a visual reminder.
Yeah.
That was it. Do we have a second?
Are you looking for a second?
Second?
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
Second. Discussion?
Stuart seconded.
Yeah, so discussion?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got
You
it.
said discussion.
Discussion. Did I say, do you think I said seconded again?
Yes.
Yeah, no, discussion. I appreciate you guys taking the time with us on the site walk. It was really helpful to see what was out there, and I can appreciate the fact that you have to represent a lot of people in making this decision, so, what we're asking of you, you're having to bring back and try to sell to your association. But I do think all of these things we're asking of you will be improvements to the natural resource, and I hope for the majority of your residents, they will see them also as improvements to the property. I guess that'll be seen. Anything else? Ready to vote? All in favor? Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the work session for 815 Lafayette Road. Is there anyone here to speak to that?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Patrick Crimmins with Ty and Bond here on behalf of the applicant. Also here with me this afternoon is Mike Brown representing ownership. We are here today for a project at 815 Lafayette Road. We're here for a work session with you folks to seek some input on a project that we're going to be submitting to the Technical Advisory Committee and then again to you folks for conditional use permit shortly. I appreciate the time you gave us last week on the site walk. Hopefully it was helpful just to get the understanding of the landscape and the layout. What I will do now is just kind of go into an overview of the site, and then really what I'm just here for is kind of feedback from you folks on this, what is really a very preliminary plan, especially in terms of what we've done with the community space, which I'll get into in more detail as part of my presentation. But this is the site, 815 Lafayette Road, formerly the home of the WHEB radio station, which is no longer there. The proposed project is it's a multifamily development with 3 buildings. There'll be 24 units in each of the buildings, which is a by right. We're not seeking any sort of density incentives as part of this project. Because we are building 3 buildings, we are required to provide 10% community space on the parcel. The parcel itself is a little unique. It is 20 acres in size, but approximately a third of that land area is actually the salt marsh, which of course is not buildable. In addition, and you can see here on the plan, there we go. There's a larger piece of land up top, which we're looking to remain undeveloped at this time. It is home to an existing antenna that has rights here. There was an existing antenna in this location, which was taken down in the past few months. The existing HEB radio station building is approximately in this location, coming right out to basically the top of the bank. So the site development area itself really is about 5 acres here, bound by Lafayette Road, the Lafayette Plaza, the salt marsh along the creek, and then the land above. So the driveway entry coming in off the site is going to remain in the same location. We've situated these 3 buildings set back from outside of the 100-foot buffer, and in addition, some of the amenity space areas and sidewalk connectors along the rears of these buildings as well. There will be parking along the face of these buildings, which is essentially in existing paved areas. To reduce impervious surface on the site, we are putting parking on the first level of these apartment buildings. They're 4-story apartment buildings. First story will be parking with 3 floors of units above. Thanks, Kate. And then, so that's kind of the overview of the project itself. From the community space standpoint, we met with the Technical Advisory Committee last month also for a work session to seek some feedback. The initial package that was submitted to both them and you folks had a different proposal for the community space, which I think we discussed last week. But at TAC, we received some feedback that there may be challenges pursuing the proposal that we had set forth. That it had included the salt marsh area in it as part of the community space, which was some good feedback that we'd gotten from staff. So we kind of went back to the drawing board in advance of meeting with you folks on site last week and this work session to come up with an alternative for a community space proposal. And what we're looking to do along the water's edge is a greenway. And you can see here in green that proposed area, which is basically the entire 100-foot buffer along the rear of those buildings between the creek. We're proposing to put into community space. Essentially, that would put that into conservation. There would be no development that could occur within that area. We are proposing within that to create this greenway what would be a passive path, probably a wood chip trail. I'm very much here to listen to feedback from you folks as well on the trail itself and what we should be doing within that buffer. Initially the thought is obviously some selective invasive species removal, obviously trying to maintain well-established vegetation, but I'm open to any feedback from you folks relative to that. So that the trail itself would come down, and then as drawn here, very preliminarily is kind of following that 50-foot buffer line. We do have a small outlook that we've kind of identified here. You'll recall when we did the site walk, this is actually that rear parking lot and where the building comes down right to the bank, so that this is already highly disturbed. There's actually all pavement in here. In addition, there's also a septic system in here that currently services that building. We're removing that septic system as part of this project. This project will be on sewer, which will be an environmental benefit. So we've tried to situate that outlook in a manner that would give some views of the creek, and then kind of coming along similarly, just following that buffer. And another potential outlook here is as the land kind of jogs in, you can see the line of the salt marsh and the bank here. From a stormwater management standpoint, right now the site, the way it is, it all just sheet flows directly into the Sagamore Creek without any sort of treatment whatsoever. We are proposing advanced stormwater treatment, which is a requirement obviously of the City of Portsmouth, and alteration of terrain, which this project will require both permits. So we'd be treating it with a combination of best management practices. Right now we have to capture these paved areas. We're designing a rain garden in this this front lawn area here, just behind the existing signage that's out there, in combination with some potential small underground detention and treatment systems for any of this maybe impervious surface in the rear. That's the way it is preliminarily designed right now, but the intent certainly is to provide advanced stormwater treatment and improve the site from that standard. I think that's about it. I guess like I said, we're here for work session. I'm open to questions, feedback from you folks. We are looking to submit here in a few weeks, so fire away.
Allison.
Yeah, Patrick, I think you touched on the things that I'm really concerned about at any rate, and that is, one, that you remove invasive species as much as you can.
Sure.
Keep the community greenway as natural as possible.
Yep.
And at a minimum, please replace all the trees that are currently around the building and down the drive. If you could take that and have that as a minimum number of trees that need to be put onto this project.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question about the existing antenna. Is that like leased? Is the antenna leasing that property? Do they have? At some point
they
will
have
be taken
easement.
down?
They have easement rights to it, so they actually have that. They essentially have ownership on top of the land for this.
So is it like there in perpetuity, or does it have a
It is.
timeline?
It is there in perpetuity.
Okay.
Unless they decide to remove it themselves.
Okay.
I think we touched upon this when we were at the site. Is there a way to get access from the plaza to the community space? So through the fence, or have an opening so that people can park and actually access the community space?
Yes, certainly we can look at opportunity for that. I think we'd like to have a discussion with the abutting property owner just to make sure he's okay with that, but I don't see why it wouldn't. I think it would be great to have that access for both properties, quite frankly. So we'll approach those discussions, and the grade generally works, so I think we can make it work so that there is a connection through. But again, we'll discuss with the neighbor, but it was a good comment. Thank you.
Yeah. And secondly, I would really love to see that community area be not mown lawn. It's like, you can call it rewilding, replanting with native species, but making it a space that flows naturally to the marsh or salt marsh.
Sure, yeah. No, that's a good feedback. And again, I think along the water's edge where we can, we're going to try and keep whatever's obviously established and just removing selective invasives and kind of weaving that path through there. I think I talked about it on the site walk. We do have this area of land that's just generally the 50 to 100 foot buffer. We have some amenity areas sitting here. We want the residents to feel like they have some privacy as well and access to their own amenity areas. So the idea would be to establish a planting area between what would be, the greenway, trail, and, the buildings and amenities that would be planted with like native species, yes. So that's certainly direction that I've given the landscape architects and wetland scientists already based on last week's sidewalk.
Thank you.
I'm a little concerned with, putting a trail down low into the buffer. We wanted to invite people, but at the same time, you don't want people to then think they can go farther and try to access the tidal wetlands or bring their dogs down to the water where there's kind of a pathway that's already started. Is that going to invite, more access than we want down there? And I don't know if potentially putting like a low
Split rail fence?
guardrail fence, something like
Split rail
that,
fence.
along the wetland side of the pathway would help maybe be a bit of a deterrent.
Sure.
And I don't know if maybe no dogs allowed. I'm not sure how the commission feels about that in this
I
area.
think they could probably walk on the path, but they can't, they need to be on a lead.
Leashed, yeah.
Also, the buffer marker signs.
Yes, yeah, buffer marker signs helps as a deterrent as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think the existing vegetation creates a nice buffer itself, but I certainly, especially particularly where it's been previously disturbed and we're showing this potential outlook area, we could look at opportunity to deter that. There is a steep drop off from the bank. So I think that alone would help deter a little bit, but certainly
Yeah.
anything to
I'm
help.
just thinking of like the Pierce Island where
Yeah.
several areas have been very overrun with the dogs coming onto the salt marsh.
Okay, yeah, no, great comment.
And then back to Stuart's question about parking, like public parking access. So I see that there's some parking spaces that are on the surface. Are those like assigned to residents, or do you think they'll be mostly used by residents such that public couldn't park there? And I'm assuming they're not going to park in the garage per se, because that's for the
Certainly,
residents.
certainly within the garages would be designated, obviously
Yeah.
for residences. I don't know that we've even figured out yet if we're going to be assigning spaces along the drive aisles yet for the buildings. There is an excess of parking, a small excess on the site. That's just just based on the way the layout works. We're not
Yeah.
trying to pave more,
But
but
like how many spaces though?
I'm trying to recall the site plan that we'd submit. I think the latest iteration that we have, it's between 5 and 9 additional spaces.
Okay. Yeah, because I think, I know that's something you have to talk to the plaza about, but opening it up
Yep,
for that parking would be really beneficial,
certainly.
I guess.
Snow storage not in the buffer?
Understood.
I think also because of your height, you're 4 stories, right? Including
Yes.
that first parking.
Yep.
Looking into bird-friendly windows or the decals or, because you're right along that wetland, which has a lot of bird
Okay.
traffic and migration. Yeah, Barbara?
Patrick, can you talk a little bit more about what you had originally proposed in the TAC?
Sure.
Just feedback on the community space.
Yep. So again, because the parcel is very unique and it's large, right? It's 20 acres. So we have to provide, even though the site development area itself is only about 5 acres, we have to provide 10% community space on that 20 acres. So what we were looking at is opportunities to try and meet that. And what we had previously done was showed the salt marsh area as part of that community space area, but there were concerns that that wouldn't meet the definitions within the ordinance. And we had shown, thanks Kate, we had shown, that's the buffer impact exhibit, yep. We had shown potentially, utilizing what we're showing now is like walkway amenity area around the building. We weren't particularly crazy about it because of the concerns with privacy and the public being able to, kind of coming in around these buildings. So we just took the feedback particularly with respect to the salt marsh and the concerns that we had with putting the public up right along the rears of these buildings. You know, we don't want the peeping Toms, the people out there. We really wanted to create a separation, so it kind of worked to a benefit in both ways, in that we were able to come up with this alternative proposal, which rather than putting what would essentially be is already a conservation in a sense, because you can't build in that salt marsh, taking the community space and putting it on the buffer to restrict any further development in the buffer along the creek.
Thank you. Can I follow? I'm just gonna
Keep
follow
going.
up on that. So you had to have more community space based on what their feedback was, and you
We didn't have to have more. We actually had, based on this, just because of the sheer size of the salt marsh,
yeah.
we had more than enough. But we were looking at opportunities to find larger land areas because we're calculating it against 20 acres rather than the 5 acres of site development area.
And the salt marsh here is
Salt
your-
marsh here is, I mean, you can.
community space?
It is not going to be considered community space. That's why I think this gravel season, this is old, we're not pursuing this.
Totally, I get
Yeah,
that, but
I guess
it was going to be community
Yeah, we
space.
were, I mean, you can see the number there. It's about 350,000 square feet, plus or minus. I mean, I think that included a small path that walked up and connected up, but that, down in the legend, I'm trying to read it from here. I think that says like 340-something thousand square feet.
349.
That's all part of the parcel, the salt marsh. It's all considered part of the property.
But it wasn't. I mean, just sort of what I'm getting at is my interpretation of what you have here, unless the salt marsh is all community space, is this is less impact on the natural resource than what you're coming to us with now.
Well, we're looking to just do a passive trail. We're not looking to have, it's like a wood chip trail. We don't want to have any sort of paved impacts within that greenway.
So would you come to us with a full proposal that would include where that trail is going to go?
Yes.
Like, you'll like walk it, could you take us on that trail, you know, where you think that
We
would go?
will have to probably tag it. I mean, to the exact extent, we'll probably have to notate the plans to a point that we're not removing trees, we're meandering the trails, but we're not bringing it any closer to a certain distance. That's what we have to work through in the next couple of weeks as part of our proposal. We are going out tomorrow, in fact, and mapping the invasive species themselves so that we'll have a better idea of where we're going to actually get in and be removing that. Excuse me.
Okay, it's just because I'm sort of interpreted this all as an advantage to the property, for sure. Like if you're going to own or rent or whatever here, you're going to have this nice natural resource that you can access a little bit. And then, but not really a community.
Well, that's the way the zoning is written, unfortunately.
Right.
So we're just trying to work within the
But you're also trying to
Trying to
work
work within the
within
parameters.
not disturbing that area behind where, on the upland. And so that's, like, that would be, to me, the community space.
Yeah, but I don't know that the public's gonna, well, I know we had proposed it and it was very preliminary. We had concerns with what we showed, bringing it up along the back edge of this building.
I think you mean where the antenna is, right, Barbara? That upland?
Yeah, that upland,
Up here,
yeah.
yeah, we're not looking to have this be part of this project. There's challenges up here that's part of this parcel. One is obviously the antennas themselves and the rights that they have up there. Two is the homeless encampment situation that we have up there. Inviting the public up there is probably not the best idea if it's not developed. There might be a public safety issue. The other issue is we'd be inviting the public to walk up through this site and then they'd be walking onto an adjacent landowner's property that they don't have the rights to. So what we're just trying to do is keep this I'm not saying that vision shouldn't happen someday. This is probably phase one of that ultimate vision where this all connects through and can get out to the high school. I think that's where you're going with this, and that is the way it is designed, kind of the way it is. It comes up to this point and stops. I think that's a larger discussion though in terms of how we can make this continue all the way out through here, but there are challenges because we don't control this land. There's a creek that, there's a stream that comes out that needs to be crossed. I think that would be a larger discussion. We're not opposed to that larger discussion. We just don't want the project to be tied down with that because of the concerns we have with it.
Yeah, and I'm just nervous about going forward without that larger discussion and having not really, we'll have more impact to the natural resource and we're not really going to gain much as a community. And that area, I mean, you're across from, you're near Crossroads House. That area is mostly, a lot of people that travel that area are going to be people that are just not the people that are going to recreate out there the way you think they will.
Well, where this is getting developed and now we'll have people occupying it, we're less concerned, and it will be monitored. We'll be less concerned with this area. It up here is certainly a concern. Bringing the public up into this piece of land that, is not developed yet, is rocky, it's wooded, it has antennas. It's just, we're trying not to invite the public up there at this point. I understand the larger vision of creating this connection that can ultimately get up over to the high school. But where we're not proposing to do anything up here, we were trying to just keep this proposal to this area. And essentially, this could be that first section of what would potentially be something in the future. I hesitate to draw like a path from here connecting to this because we're inviting the public to trespass.
Right.
Well, there's easements, though. I think we did talk about that.
No, I'm talking on the adjacent parcel. We don't have rights to that, so we would be inviting the public to cross our parcel and go into a private property.
I mean, signage could be put up and things like that. I understand it's, you're heading in that direction.
I guess if we're putting signage up to prevent them from going onto private property here, why would we want to continue this up here where we're bringing now people into an area that is potentially not safe for the public because of the homeless issue and also because of all these antennas and wires and rocks. I don't know if we're going to stop it here. I'd rather just stop it here. I'm happy to show like a dashed line on the plan that says potential future connection, but we're just not looking to do that as part of this project.
Yeah, it's just,
Mike Brown, one of the owners of the property. Since you guys have been out there last week, there's a couple more tents. And it's been an ongoing issue for us to keep it safe out there. And our concern is that we're going to open this up to a bigger problem that's currently going on. And the Portsmouth Police Department has been awesome about taking care of it. We've been up there several times cleaning up and needles and different type of things. In fact, some of the people that work for me have dogs and stuff that walk through, and we understand the need for making so people can walk through there, but we've been trying to keep it safe. And there's a lot of other things that people want to talk about or don't want to talk about that go on up there. And so we have a big concern that we could be opening this up to a potential bigger problem like Pierce Island and other things. So we'd like to keep it down in the lower section until we come up with, if we even ever do anything up top. So I just wanted to let you guys know that there's more encampment already just in a week. Thank you.
thank you.
Patrick, is that the currently shaded green? Does that just get you 10%? Is that a little bit in excess of 10%?
It is. It's 10.1%.
10.1%, okay. All right.
Which is honestly, it's just how it worked out.
Yeah.
Because you can see, we shaded the whole buffer. The only green that we don't have shaded in that buffer is where the NHDOT has a drainage easement along the front of the road.
Yeah. I mean,
We don't have rights to it, so.
I have a little bit of an issue just with having the 0 to 50 foot being able to be counted towards the community space. I mean, it's only like one step beyond the actual salt marsh. but, I mean, you don't really have any wiggle room with your 10.1% there to move it elsewhere if we're not contemplating the antenna upland area. So I don't really have a suggestion there. It's just, if anyone else has anything to.
Well, I don't know, I appreciate it. I think that area could be all considered community, because we're leaving the plants there for the community. You know, they're not gonna go in there and tear everything down and put something else back. That's gonna be left, and it's gonna be as natural as possible, and I think that's because it's community space, you know? If it were for the apartments, it might look different.
But they can't regulate, I mean, as the regulations are written, they can't really do anything down there anyway. And plus, this is shoreland property too, so they can't, I mean, they have certain things they can do, but they're limited on what they can do, you know, even path-wise, because it's shoreland under those regulations. So I feel like it's sort of like, you know, we can't use it, but we'll call it community space. And I think we've heard this story before, and there's pretty big impacts from that, you know, when you drive past after the construction's done.
But what's the idea of that community space? Because if it is rewilded with native species and it becomes thickly grown, it's going to have ecosystem services, it's going to have birds, and that is good for the community, but will also keep people out because it's not mown grass. So we can probably find a balance there.
Yeah.
I'm hoping.
And it would definitely be really important to see that kind of detail when you come back to us.
Absolutely.
Like, you know, not saying, oh, we're going to remove the invasive species, but really
Oh, no, we'll have a
good plan.
We'll have a planting
and a lot
plan.
of detail. Because, yeah, those are definitely benefits that.
Yep.
Is there any concern that that's kind of setting a precedent that the 0 to 50 can be counted?
We've already done it along the North Mill Pond.
Right, and that's the
Yeah.
one where I go by and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is just not, you know, everybody's walking their dogs and the dogs are running down into the brook, and it's just, it's not.
Nothing's been built yet.
No, not at North Mill Pond, but when you go by off of Route 1 on the Hodgson Brook area, they, you know, there's the walkway there, and there's a lot of impact there that runs into Mill.
Oh, it's the West End Yards project?
Yeah, it's just, if we can mitigate it as much as possible.
Yep. Yeah, understood. I mean, I guess, just to reiterate, we want to maintain the well-established vegetation, selective invasives, like really keep this a buffer, you know, between, and maybe there's the opportunity for some outlook. We'll see as we work through our design. And again, enhancing this area.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be a lawn. You know, the idea is that this would be planted with native plantings to create not only, you know, an enhanced buffer that provides further habitat, but also creates that separation from public and private too. I think it's a dual benefit.
Yeah, and my last question would be about the path and whether or not that's permittable in the shoreline.
I believe
Permit.
because it's just a wood chip trail, it wouldn't be an issue, but we'll look into it, certainly.
Yeah, definitely to have that ahead of time, so we don't have you have to come back and say we couldn't do it, because.
Yep. Yep, understood.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any other comments, suggestions? Things they want on the record?
I appreciate what they're thinking about in this project if they follow through on it.
And one more question about kind of Allison's point about the trees, because there are quite a few trees going down, you know, kind of on both sides of the road right now. Do you anticipate that being difficult to recreate that number of trees, given the footprint as it's laid out here?
I don't, no. I mean, because we're still going to have that edge along the pavement. It's just the grade's changing a little bit in order to set the building. So the vegetation has to get cut along that property line, but we're going to have just as much, if not more, planting along this buffer. I saw a hand sketch of it today, so.
Okay, yeah, that'll improve the aesthetics too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
To like get that good.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
that's it.
Really appreciate your time
Thank you
and all the
very much.
feedback.
Thanks.
Look forward to meeting with you guys soon.
All right, other business. Is that you, Kate?
Oh, yeah, it is. So we canceled the non-public that we had scheduled for what was going to be next week, I think, to talk about conservation properties. And instead, we reached out to Anna Boudreau, who's the chair of the Dover Open Land Committee. And I think she's been working with them since the late 90s, I believe, or early 2000s. And so she has been working with a lot of conservation groups and conservation commissions, different town groups, to talk about how to conserve land and how to go about that process. And so she expressed a lot of interest and is really excited to have a sort of workshop with us in November. That was the earliest she was available, to go over how Dover has gone through with their approach and how they've refined how they prioritize finding open space that they want to put into conservation or to put under easements. So she's going to sort of go over their process and maybe make some suggestions for how we might revamp our process, or just really it's going to be also a great discussion opportunity for us to sort of pick her brain about what she's saw as successful in the past with regards to reaching out to property owners, setting up conservation programs. So I think it'll be good to have a little Q&A and then a small presentation from her. So that'll be November 15th at I think our normal meeting time, so 3:30. We have it scheduled for 3:30 to 4:30 right now, but I think we're going to extend that to make it 2 hours in case there's a lot of Q&A. But yeah, I think she's really excited to talk to us and to give us some ideas and food for thought for going forward with how we proceed.
And this is replacing our typical meeting, or is it in addition?
I think it's the week after our typical meeting, so it's an addition.
Okay.
Just because we didn't know how long we'd need to go over it and do a lot of Q&As, so that date worked best for her.
I was just curious how many people are going to, did everybody say they could make it?
Right, I think I just put it on the other business so far, so that's the only time I've talked about it. So I don't know if that, hopefully that date works for everybody. We just wanted to get it on the calendar because that was the only date that really worked for her. So I know everybody probably has to check their calendars tonight or tomorrow. So if you could get back to me with your availability, that'd be great. And we can also do it on Zoom too, if that'll help people that can't make it in person. But it would be great to have people in person to be able to do a Q&A.
I'm away that week. It's the 13th or the 15th? Or
15th.
I'm away both of those, yeah, fortunately.
Do we have anything else on other business?
I did want to bring up, I don't know if everyone is on the email list for the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions, but their annual conference is November 4th. I don't know if anyone had already registered to go, but I believe the fee before the late fee kicks in is something like $50, but we can cover that with our conservation budget if anyone wants to go. It's at Pembroke Academy on November 4th. It's a Saturday. I think they have some good speakers lined up and a couple different workshops and presentations scheduled. So if anyone's interested in going to that, let us know and we can sign you up.
There's no concern for a quorum at that kind of an event? Is that true?
We never end up having it, but everybody goes to different
Goes to different things?
workshops,
Yeah,
so I'm
good.
assuming it would be all right.
So silly.
Well, we can always post a public notice too, just in case.
A public meeting?
Yeah, in case a couple people sign up. So that shouldn't be too bad. We'll know in advance, hopefully.
I'm planning to go. I've never been before. But.
I haven't either. It sounds fun.
Anything else?
I didn't, the Coastal Commission, Conservation Commission roundtable thing, there's no updates from that?
Anything to share from that? Yeah, it was interesting. I guess we can give a quick recap. that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. You hosted it, so like, oh, yeah. And I think Stuart went too, and Allison.
Went where?
Oh, maybe not.
The flood disclosure.
Yeah, for the realtors.
No, I didn't go. Because I was worried about the quorum thing.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's a movement, and there's a couple state legislators who have kind of signed on to putting forward, you know, some legislation in Concord to have it be sort of a statewide requirement that at the time of sale of a home, that there's a requirement to disclose, you know, where the house is relative to the flood zones that are mapped by FEMA, as well as any, you know, experience with flooding. And there's a little bit of that already in the disclosure form that, you know, you have to fill out anyway, but this is kind of basically beefing it up, making it mandatory, providing a little more like boundaries around what that looks like, what that information should be at that point of sale. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot of sort of debate about whether or not that's the right approach, honestly. The real estate industry, I think, is not super excited about that proposal. And I think they're sort of pointing out that, like, maybe there's something that's, you know, really the point is for everybody to understand, you know, their flood risk in their home, that maybe there's something else that should happen. You know, so for example, one of the ideas is, you know, the tax card that has a list of, you know, a lot of information on there, right? How many bedrooms, as well as like building permits. It could also have, you know, where you are in the flood zones. You know, maybe in my opinion, it should also have like your, you know, where you are relative to the jurisdictional wetlands as well, and in the buffer zone. So anyway, so there's some competing ideas about exactly the right way to go about it, but I think this is going to go through whatever the legislative process, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, and they are looking for a little bit more feedback. It seems like the group is kind of committed to this particular sort of approach at this moment. That's the way I was kind of reading the discussion. But I don't know, Stuart, did you want to share anything else that your takeaways?
It was super interesting because you're actually interacting with legislation that's going to be proposed to the New Hampshire Senate or House. I think it's positive, but from a Conservation Commission member point of view, I think it also needs to go further, as you mentioned. Like, could we have disclosure about wetlands and other things on there too? It's a good start. And as you said, the real estate industry is probably not very happy about that because it comes back to them, but it's trying to centralize those requests, and it makes sense that it goes to one place instead of having several of them coming around from each owner.
Yeah, and I think there's probably some opportunity to kind of like, you know, raise the sort of skills of the real estate industry in this particular area, you know, being able to read the FEMA flood zone maps, and I see some other opportunities there too that could come along, you know, if this was required, that there would then be even more incentive, I think, to participate in some of those kind of educational programs. Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm a little bit confused about it myself, just because of where my property's located, and I buy flood insurance, but when I look at the FEMA flood maps, it's not near my house, but the wetland is flooded. So I think there's going to be some detail that the real estate agents are going to have to get into in order to understand that, well, the house is high and dry, but the wetland's going to be flooded. You know what I mean, kind of thing, and I don't know.
Yeah, and the maps
Becomes a
change.
liability.
Yeah.
What?
And the maps change too, right? Like they,
Yeah, sure.
and they are mistakes and accuracies. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. But it's hard to pass legislation like that in New Hampshire, so
No.
it'll be interesting to see, but. There's nothing else.
I think so.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Great. Thank you.